On the surface, it looks like the bread and butter of state politics. Announcements about health, transport and infrastructure. But the past week has been different, with senior ministers repeatedly pledging their support for the Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk.
The Premier is determined to lead our united team.
I'm absolutely committed to supporting the Premier.
I'm really proud to be part of this team led by Annastacia Palaszczuk.
All ministers wanted to express the strength of their support for Annastacia Palaszczuk.
The Premier herself is on holidays and out of the country. This was her last public appearance over 10 days ago.
Who wants to kick off?
It was the nature of her sudden departure that started tongues wagging.
We want change. When do we want it? Now. Do we want to feel safe in our homes? Yes.
With no public announcement about going on leave after a particularly bad week handling a youth crime crisis.
The Premier looks tired and bored and not particularly interested in continuing in the job, and the punters can sense that.
John Black is an election demographer and former Labor senator who believes the Premier's days are numbered.
Clearly what's being lined up now behind the scenes is a deal between the left and the right, as you can see by the persons who are parading themselves as supporters of the Premier. What you're likely to see is a deal where there's one nomination for the Premier's position, one nomination for the Deputy, and that's it.
This is by no means a consensus view. There's no evidence of counting numbers inside the caucus, although some backbenchers are privately expressing concern.
Sure, there may well be questions, and that's a good thing for a leader. But immediate danger? No, I don't see it.
John McKell is a former state Labor MP and parliamentary speaker. He says the rules the Labor Party brought in after the knifing of Kevin Rudd in 2010 makes any move against an elected leader almost impossible, involving a vote of the parliamentary wing, branch members and affiliated unions.
In the event that Annastacia Palaszczuk wanted to stay, and that's all the indications so far, she will stay.
Annastacia Palaszczuk made Australian political history in 2015, defeating the one-term Newman LNP government with a record swing.
Literally no one in Australia thought Annastacia Palaszczuk could knock off a popular Premier in Campbell Newman, let alone after one term holding the biggest parliamentary majority in Australian history.
Stability or chaos? Strong leadership or reckless behaviour?
In her second term, she moved from being the accidental to the tough Premier, winning a third term by highlighting her handling of the COVID pandemic. But since then, Annastacia Palaszczuk's popularity has been sliding.
The polls clearly indicate that the Labor Party is going to lose somewhere between 7 and 15 seats.
The drop in popularity coincided with an integrity crisis over the role of Labor lobbyists and an increasing focus on the Premier's apparent love of red carpet events.
The LNP started to call the Premier, started to attack the Premier personally, not the government, and call the Premier the part-time Premier. The Premier who's the red carpet Premier who likes attending the glitzy gala balls and not fronting up at Cabinet.
The Premier's supporters say such criticism is grossly unfair, although they do concede there have been some communication problems. And the Premier's often presidential style can mean fast decision-making, but not always good policy.
It seems that a lot of people are complaining, senior public servants, MPs, junior ministers, complaining that power has become too centralised around the Premier and around the Department of Premier and Cabinet.
I think there hasn't been a Cabinet deliberative process that is rigorous, and that's why in some instances you've seen policy U-turns.
The most glaring example of this is the handling of the youth crime debate, where the government initially rejected the opposition's calls for tougher bail laws, only to later embrace them.
The government was criticised, I think, or reportedly criticised by one of their own, where they were both too tough on crime and not enough tough on crime. Now, what would rectify that is good, solid policy development and rigour around the policy.
The Premier returns to work next week. With 14 months until the next election, and 14 months to turn public sentiment around.
They tend to mark politicians pretty hard these days. If you get any more than 2 terms, you're doing pretty well.